Hello everyone, this is Shadow News, and today I want to try to explain what is going on in Israeli politics right now. You might have heard there's a lot of mess, there's a political stalemate, which might lead to yet another election, the third time in a row. And I'm not going to go into all the history of it because it will take many hours to explain everything that got us to this point, so I'm only going to talk about the current situation. And I'm going to use this website which you can play with all the parties and try to form a coalition. This is the Knesset seats, it has 120 seats. You have to form a coalition of parties that will be at least 61 seats out of 120, basically a majority that you have to reach in order to form a government and to rule. And these are all the parties. The biggest one is the Blue and White Party, which is actually a combination of a few parties. And they are now the biggest party. The second place is the Likud party, headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the prime minister, who will keep being prime minister until he is replaced. And so he has the interest to drag it out as long as he can. He doesn't care. He will be prime minister up until someone else can form a majority. And even if he doesn't have the majority, he will keep being prime minister, which, by the way, is a bad system in my opinion. It gives him the motivation to draw this out as long as he possibly can. He's also facing all kinds of corruption charges, and that's probably one of the reasons he's so desperate to stay prime minister, because that way he'll be able to use his influence, his power to try to manipulate the outcome of his trial and all of that. And that's why a lot of parties want to take him out. They have no problem sitting with Likud. For example, the Blue and White Party says it has no problem to sit with the Likud party, but they have a problem with the prime minister because of the corruption charges, because of the fact that he might try to use his power to get himself out of legal trouble. So they refuse on principle to sit with him. They might compromise and agree for some kind of rotation, but they will not agree to him staying as prime minister right now. So that's the biggest cause of the mess of why no one can form any kind of government, because the other parties are all too small. And some parties won't sit with each other. I'll explain this in detail. So the biggest parties are the Blue and White Party, which have 33 seats. And the second largest party is the Likud, which has 31 seats. If they were to join forces together, then they would have 64 seats, enough to form a government even without all the other parties. So the only obstacle is the fact that the Blue and White Party refuses to sit with Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister. If he would step down, he can still remain a Knesset member, he can still be the head of the party, and then they would be willing to sit with him, but they don't want to sit under him, under his rulership, when he is suspected of serious crimes. So that's the biggest cause of the whole political stalemate and all of that. It's like a chicken game between these two parties, who of them will agree to settle first, or if not, it will lead to another election, which no one wants because it costs a lot of money and the government is basically unable to do anything, unable to make any laws and so on. The next biggest party is the Arab Party. This is basically a joining of several different parties who banded together, because in Israel you have to have at least 4 mandates, 4 seats in order to even get in. If you don't get 4 seats, if you get less than that, then you don't get in at all, and then those mandates get spread over all the other parties. And so for that reason, all the previous Arab parties all joined into a single list, which has 13 seats. And this party would refuse to sit with any other party. Basically, they are very kind of stiff-necks. They demand to get a lot of things which no other party would agree, especially all the part to do with the Palestinians and all of that. So they will refuse to sit with any so-called Zionist party, and so they are basically out of the equation. They are not. They will not support any government by any other party, so we can take them out completely. Also, some parties would refuse to sit with them. For example, Avigdor Lieberman would never sit with the Arab Party because he's very much against them. He calls them traitors and enemies of the state and all of that, so he would never sit with them. If I try it in this program, you see it won't let me combine them. Here is Avigdor Lieberman's party, and if I try to add the Arab Party, it will say he will never sit with them. So we can take this one out of the equation. This is the Shas party of the Orthodox Jews, and they are in a single block with Netanyahu. Netanyahu has made an alliance with all these religious parties, and they are together no matter what. And even now he's claiming that even though his party has 31 seats, but he actually represents 55 seats because of all the parties which are always with him. So let me just show it. So we have Likud, we have Shas, we have Yehadut Torah, another Orthodox religious party, And we have the Yamina party, which are also, they're like a religious party, but not extreme, not orthodox. And so together they are 55 seats, and they are like a very allied bloc. They always want to be together, and Netanyahu always gives them what they want. This is one of my personal criticisms against Netanyahu, is that he always gives these parties everything that they want, simply because they will support whatever he wants to do. And that's the biggest reason I'm personally against Netanyahu. This is my personal view, because I'm very much against the Orthodox parties and what they are trying to do. They want to promote religion basically through the government institutions. They want to give more money to their own sector of religious people by various means. They want to sponsor the yeshiva, in which people only study Torah all day long and all of that, and they are against going to the army and all of that. So I actually kind of think it's laughable that Netanyahu always claims that he is the biggest patriot, he is the biggest defender of Israel, and yet he always joins forces with the parties who are even against going to the army and who contribute less than all the other ones to the economy and all of that, because so many of their population spends their time only studying Torah and all that stuff. And I have no problem with people doing that if it's from their own pocket. My problem is that why my tax money is used to support the things that I don't believe in, which I think is just a waste of resources. And so that's actually my biggest problem with Netanyahu as a prime minister, that he joined forces with these two parties and gives them everything they want, because that way they support him. And so together they all have a block of 55 seats, but it's not enough to form a government. And in the past, Avigdor Lieberman, this one, was also in the same bloc. He also used to be together with all these parties, including these Orthodox parties, but recently, suddenly, he started being against them. Suddenly, he's saying the same thing I just said, that he's against all the rules that these religious Orthodox try to pass and all of that, and which is funny because in the past he had no problem with that. He always did sit with them in the same government, and he represents the Russian-speaking Israelis, those Israelis who came from the Soviet Union and all of that. And a lot of them are against the religious Orthodox parties because they cause them trouble. They promote all kinds of laws like, the Orthodox Rabbanut is the one that decides who can get married or not, and a lot of Russian-speaking Jews are not fully Jews maybe, or they can prove that they're fully Jews. And so these parties and these powers always cause trouble for that population. And so a lot of that population dislikes this whole Orthodox system and all of that. And so that's why he's appealing to his audience, to the people who would support him, by suddenly saying that he's against all of that, which I personally don't buy. That's why I didn't vote for him, because for 20 years he was only talking but always sitting with them. But now suddenly he's against them now, and he won't sit with them, just like he won't sit with the other Arab parties. And there are all kinds of rumors that the real reason is that he simply wants to sabotage Netanyahu. He wants to get rid of Netanyahu because of something personal that happened between them, that they dislike each other, and so he's only pretending now to be so much against the Orthodox simply so that Netanyahu won't be able to form a government and will get replaced maybe from inside his own party, and that's what he really wants. Those are the rumors. And it's possible that in the last second maybe he will join them again, maybe if they promise certain things that he demanded, certain laws that he wanted passed, maybe if they do agree to his laws and his demands. And basically, if these parties chicken out because they were head-to-head on certain laws that he wanted to pass and vice versa, and they're against each other, if they will reach a compromise, maybe Lieberman will indeed join this coalition, and then they'll have 63 seats. But it's not very likely because Lieberman is the one who caused the previous election. He didn't want to join a coalition by Netanyahu, which back then had 60 seats. They had only one missing, and he refused to join, and that's why we had another election. So it's not likely that he will now suddenly back down. Another possibility is that this party, which is Avodah, Labor Party, headed by Amir Peretz, he has 6 seats, and if he joins the coalition, they will have exactly 61 seats, and so it's possible Netanyahu will somehow try to convince this guy to join him so that he'll have a government. But it's not very likely, especially because Amir Peretz promised, he swore on camera multiple times that he will never sit with Netanyahu. And he even shaved off his mustache, which he had for 40 years, on camera, to say to the camera, now you're able to see my lips, I will not sit with Netanyahu. So he did that before the election, and if he now does the opposite, he will become a total joke and he will disappear the next election. So I highly doubt that will happen. And this party also promised it will not sit with Netanyahu, not only because of all the corruption charges, but because they are ideologically opposed. This is the most left-wing party there is, the Meretz party. And it's also very unlikely they will ever sit with Netanyahu or with the Yamina party, because they are ideologically on the opposite side of the spectrum. So you see, the system doesn't even let me combine them. It says because of this party, Yamina party won't sit with the Meretz party because they're ideologically opposed to each other. They will never sit together. And so, as you see, there is no possibility of a government. And let's now try with the Kahol Lavan party, the blue and white party. And the Likud will of course refuse to join. The Arabs will refuse to join. The religious parties would refuse to join because they support Netanyahu, who always gives them everything they want. They will never support blue and white because the second place in that party is Yair Lapid, who is very much against the Orthodox demands and all of that. That's how he built up his whole political capital, by being against them. And so it will be political suicide for him to join them. You can see his picture. He's second place after Benny Gantz. And so these parties will never sit with him, even though the system does allow it, but I think it's highly unlikely. And Avigdor Lieberman said that he will only sit in a government which is a unity government containing both Likud and blue and white. So only if these two join forces, only then he will agree to join as well. But as I explained previously, it's very unlikely these two will be able to settle their differences. But let's say Lieberman will choose to sit with Gantz. This party, Yamina party, also said it will only sit with Netanyahu. And these two parties, the Labour Party and the Meretz party, would agree to sit with Gantz, but Meretz won't sit with Lieberman again because of ideological differences. Meretz is very much for negotiations, the two-state solution, all that kind of stuff, and Lieberman is totally opposed that. He wants to kill all the Hamas leaders and all of that, and this party will never agree to that. So they will not sit together. As you can see, the system won't let me even join them. So let's say without Lieberman we can have these two parties, and it's only 44 seats. And the Arab party, as I said, won't join. But let's say the Arab parties does join, it's still not enough. And Lieberman would never sit with the Arab party and not with the Meretz party, and so it's not enough for a government. They have to have at least 61 seats. And none of these parties would join Gantz. They are all loyal to Netanyahu because he always gave them what they wanted. And so that's the cause of why no one can form a government on either side. Not the right wing, not the left wing. No one can form a government on their own. There are too many differences between the small parties and they will never agree to join and so on. So the only real solution is for Kahol Lavan and Likud to join forces together. Then even without any of the other parties, they have 64 seats. And also, if they two join, then Lieberman said that he would join them as well. And maybe some of the other parties also would be willing to join. I think Labour Party would be willing to join such a constellation if only these two big parties settle their differences. And the biggest problem, as I said, is the fact that blue and white promised, they also promised before the election they would never sit under Netanyahu as long as he's facing those corruption charges. They said that if he comes out of his legal trouble totally clean, then they would have no problem to sit with him. But as it stands right now, they do not agree to sit with Netanyahu under him. They might agree with some kind of a rotation in which he will be second place, which will be 2 years from now, and then by then maybe he'll solve his legal problems, and then depending on the outcome they can decide in advance what would happen next. And so that's the biggest cause of the whole mess. And I think actually Likud party should probably just tell Netanyahu, you know, you can stay the head of the party, you can still be a Knesset member, but you should simply let someone else be prime minister. But he doesn't want that to happen, and so I think probably it might lead to yet another election, because Netanyahu stays prime minister as long as someone replaces him, and so what does he care? He can stay prime minister under a transitional government endlessly, and so why should he step down when he doesn't have to? So I think the only hope is that his own party from inside will replace him, someone else will step up in his place, then it's possible to work this whole thing out. But if not, it will probably lead to another election which might end up exactly the same place. And so that's why it's extremely stupid. It's just a waste of billions of shekels to waste money and time on another election when the results will be very similar, and then they will be back right at the same place. And so this is a very bad thing, because no government can function like this. There's not enough seats on any side, and no one will be able to pass any kind of laws, and so this is a total mess. So hopefully it will be resolved somehow. My bet is most likely Kahol Lavan and Likud will somehow reach some kind of compromise, some kind of solution, probably a rotation between Gantz and Netanyahu, with Netanyahu in second place, with Gantz being prime minister for the first 2 years, I don't think this party will agree to nothing short of that. So I hope I explained everything. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below and I can explain. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's been informative, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.